All right, a very warm welcome to today's webinar, An Introduction to Scripting. This is a brand new webinar and a brand new topic that we have never covered before. So I am extremely excited and proud to be able to share this content with you. As always, I cannot see or hear you, but I do want to interact with you. And today I want to interact with you even more than usual because I know that this is going to be a very interesting topic that will raise a lot of questions. So don't be shy, use the Q&A. We will check the Q&A throughout the course of this webinar and try to answer any questions that you have. Most of you probably already know me. My name is Jennifer Schmidt. I'm a member of Therefore's digital engagement team. And I want to say that I do not have a technical background. I even studied political science in college. So I am probably in the same position as many of you today, where I'm interested in scripting, I'm interested in Therefore, but I don't have that technical background. And so I want to be able to act like a bridge between this technical subject and us common people, who do not have this technical background in computer science. But many of you on the call, I know, are real technical experts. Many of you have this really expertise. And for that, I actually have Roman on the call with me today, who I'm so happy is joining me. Roman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for introducing me. So as many of you already know, my name is Roman Jukic. I'm learning manager at Therefore. Together with Jennifer, we are creating this excellent e-learning content for our Therefore community. And yeah, I hope that you will enjoy this webinar today. And let's get started.
Yeah. All right. So the first, to get started, the first thing I want to do is actually have a little quiz. So the reason is I'm really curious to hear how do you, oh wait, actually this is the wrong poll. Let's go back. All right. In that case, we will do it without the quiz in Zoom. But the reason I want to have this question here is because I know a lot of people might be nervous about it. So maybe just in the Q&A, you can type your answers in really quick so I can get a feeling. How are you guys feeling about scripting? With what base of knowledge or what relationship do you have right now to this topic? The reason I ask is because a few months ago, someone was telling me that they had signed up for the e-learning classes and they saw that there was some scripting in the workflow course. And they said that as soon as they heard the word scripting, they got scared and just clicked away from it because they thought it was something that they would not be able to learn themselves. And the goal today is for us to overcome those fears, overcome those anxieties, just to hear the word scripting and make you guys confident to have a conversation about it. So let's see here. I've got some answers here on the screen already. So lots of B's, some D's, of course, Ben, yeah. But even for those of you who are answering with a C and a D, that you've done some scripting yourself or you're a D, you're already a pro, maybe this webinar will give you more ideas how to talk to scripting with people who don't have that experience, who are unfamiliar with it, and might even be anxious about just hearing that word because they are so unfamiliar with it. So got some C's. Yeah, B's, some A's. Yeah, that's like basically the mix that I was expecting because I had reviewed the attendee list beforehand. And no matter even if you're just an A, you're really just starting out, the content here is really designed to be a complete introduction. So the goals of this webinar is, first of all, let me just set your expectations. This is a non-technical webinar. It's more about learning what is possible with scripting on a very basic level, to gain confidence about talking about possibilities, but we're not going to teach scripting. So this is really not a e-workshop where you're going to be learning any scripting. You're more going to be seeing different examples of what is possible. So what exactly is on the agenda? First is, what is scripting? Why should I care? And then we'll show examples in eForms, workflow, indexing profiles. We'll show 2 examples each, and then conclude with some tips and tricks for asking questions and talking to customers. So what is scripting? Scripting is like writing a set of instructions for a computer to follow. And therefore, scripting really is all about enhancing functionalities that already exist, but not creating new features. If you walk away from this webinar with one word in your mind, it is that word, that it's enhancing what is already there. So types of issues that could be solved with scripting would be moving specific files from one folder to another. For example, if the word top secret is in the document title, it could be automatically moved to another category during a workflow. Updating an index field every time a workflow goes through a specific loop to keep track of how many times are you attempting to do this task. Or you can automatically create a new case in there for when new documents are saved. So it's very, very simple. It's really not creating any new functionalities. And that brings us to this next slide, which is all about scripting versus programming. Many of you might have heard the word programming before, and you've heard the word scripting, and you're unsure what is really the difference. Programming is creating new capabilities within Therefore. It is what our development team is doing. So when they create new features, that is computer programming. Scripting is enhancing what is already there. And so if a feature in Therefore supports scripting, it is because it was intentionally done so by our development team. So you're not hacking into the system when you add a script. You're not doing anything that's dangerous or, illegal. You're not going to break Therefore if you try one of our scripts. Nothing bad can happen because you're not going into the deep source code. You're really just adding a little script. So you can walk away from this webinar with the examples that we're showing you, try them out yourself without any fear that you're going to break your Therefore system, right? And many of you might not have scripting knowledge. You might have not done any scripting courses. So why should you care about it? Why should even salespeople care about scripting? Well, scripting allows customers to tailor Therefore to their specific needs, making the product more versatile and valuable. It also offers potential for future customization. Scripting features can further enhance Therefore to meet the precise needs of the customers. Customers are always looking for ways to streamline processes and reduce manual work. Scripting allows that to happen even beyond the standard Therefore workflow functionalities. And finally, it's a great differentiation from competitors. Therefore has strong capabilities for scripting, and that differentiates Therefore from competitors because not every other competitor has those same capabilities. So even if you're in sales, scripting is something that you should care about. So where can scripting be used in Therefore? There are 3 main locations where scripting can be added: in eForms, workflow, and indexing profiles. So we're going to start out today with eForms because eForms have some of the most straightforward abilities to add scripting. It's probably some of the more obvious use cases. So I think everyone on the call is familiar with eForms. Many of you probably have already configured eForms yourselves, so you know how easy it is. You just drag and drop the different components onto the designer. And what you'll notice is if you go onto a component, for example, here, this is the currency component, onto the conditional tab, you scroll down, you can add JavaScript. So you can add JavaScript to nearly every single eForm component. When you add a component, every component has a property name which you can view on the API tab. Most of you should be familiar with that as well because it's used in adding conditions. This property name here that you see here, this is how we reference the component when we write a script. So in eForms, the script language that we use is always JavaScript. And what kind of things can we do with JavaScript in eForms? The most common use cases would be to sum the value of goods on an order form or perform any other type of mathematical calculation. You can also calculate the number of days, such as vacation days, where you would omit the weekends from the calculation. And then you can also have very complex conditions which will either enable or disable components based on the script. So eForms have a lot of really good use cases for scripting, and we're going to show you two which I think are probably going to be very valuable to you. The first one is we are calculating the number of business days between two dates. So what you see here is we see the start date is November 14th, the end date is November 19th, and we're subtracting the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So the number of business days that is then calculated ends up being 4, because we always count starting with the first day and ending with the last day. How is this going to be achieved in the background? Well, to show you the technical explanation, let me hand over to Roman.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jennifer. So, as you have seen on the previous slide, user experience, how you can use the, let's say, JavaScript on the eForms to calculate number of the business days between two dates. So here we have some explanation. Really, I will try, not using a technical jargon here, just try to simply explain what this script does. So as you can see, there is on the each component on this eForm has some property name, as Jennifer said before. And here we have like start and end date property names for our two controls for the dates. The third control is number of the business days, and we would like, to place the number of the days, excluding the weekends, based on the start and end date. On the left side of this slide, you can see the script that we are using here. So basically, we are using one function where we set the counter field firstly to 0. So we, of course, assume there are no number of the days already summarized. So basically, then what we do, the current date, we set it that is equal to the start date. So we start with, in this case, November 14 as a first date. And then we are having one loop, a while loop, where we are staying in the loop as long as the current date is less or equal than end date. So as long as this is true, we perform the action where we say, okay, current date is equal to the start date. So November 14 will be the first one. And there is a little JavaScript function called getDay, which will give you the number of the day in the week. So each day in the week has some number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as you can see, what we are checking further in this script, if day of the week is equal 6 or 0, 6 and 0 are basically numbers related to the weekend days, such as Saturday and Sunday. So as long as the date is not equal to one of these two numbers, we will increase the counter field, which was 0 at the beginning. And then in the end, to go to the next date between the start and end dates, we will just increase the number of the date for 1. And once we reach the end date, in this case, 19th of November, then we can leave this loop and the counter value will be placed in the number of the business days component, which is here 4. You can also see the calendar visually on the right side, where we see that starting from November 14, we include also the Saturday and Sunday. So if we didn't use this script, the result would be 6, and in this case, it's 4 days.
Yep. Cool. Thank you, Roman.
Welcome.
Let me just check the Q&A, see how that went. All right. Roman, we got the feedback to adjust your camera. The other questions we'll address a little bit later.
Yeah.
Good. So next example that we have here is eForms. And what you see here is an order form for books, where we see the we're calculating quantity times unit price to get the amount, and then we're adding these amount fields together to get the order total. So here we see we're adding the book Hamlet, adding the ISBN number, quantity 3 times 9.99 is 29.97, and then 50 plus 29.97 is 79.97. So once again, this is a really useful use case for eForms because for JavaScript, because we're getting these calculations automatically. How is that being done? Once again, Roman, can you explain?
Yeah. So similarly as we previously showed the example with the number of the calculation of the number of the business days, here we have instead of the regular components, first of all, we have like a table field or like how it's called the grid with rows. And if you want, of course, again, the grid has its property name called line items. And we also have one component outside of the grid called order total, where we would like to place the sum of the amount column from the grid. First of all, there is a simple script that will help us to calculate the amount of each line in the grid. So you see quantity times unit price, and then you will get the line amount for each row. And here, just keep in mind that if you would like to access to the, let's say, properties or controls inside of the grids, then the reserved word is row, then the property name of the component. And then the script, you can, of course, get the total amount in a different ways. Here is, again, one example where at the beginning we set the total amount E0 because we haven't started the calculation yet. And then we are checking if there are some items already in the table. And after that, we are using one for loop. Basically, we are going through each row inside of the table, and we are checking if we are adding basically the value from amount column from each row to the previous total amount. So if we start, the total amount when we started is 0, then in our example, you see $50 is the next value. So we are accessing to the value from this grid or table in column amount, and we are adding this to the previous total amount. So it will be 0 plus 50, and then the next total value will be 50. And then we are stepping in next row inside of the table to get the new value for the total amount. And we will stay in this for loop as long as we have some records inside of the table. So once we reach the last row inside of the table or grid, we can leave the loop, and then the total amount value will be placed, in this case, in order total field.
Yep.
On the plot.
Cool. And that's how simple it goes. Of course, it looks like a lot to learn, but as you hear the explanations and you see where all of this information is coming from, you know it's the API name, I think it becomes a lot easier to understand and even try yourself. All right, so that concludes our section on the eForms. I'm just going to check the questions really fast. We've got one question from Adriano. I'm not familiar with eForms. Is Visual Basic supported in eForms or only JavaScript? I believe only JavaScript.
JavaScript is supported here. As you can see, also the name is stated about the section where you can write the code.
Yeah. Great. So let's move on to workflow now. We have a lot to cover, and I don't want to go over time. So with workflow, as you guys know, a workflow is comprised of a lot of individual workflow tasks. And therefore, we have two main types of workflow tasks: manual tasks, which require human intervention, and automatic tasks. Most of the automatic tasks support scripting, because you will want to be able to give, therefore, more information so it can independently make a decision about what actions to take, right? For a manual task, a human needs to make that decision, so there's no need to add scripting. But of course, in an automatic task, the computer needs to have all the information available so it can perform the correct action. The two examples that we have prepared today is using update index data task and the copy document task. These are simple examples that can be used in a lot of workflows that I think even you, if you have no prior experience with scripting, can actually start using today. I do want to say that REST call, which is a workflow task that allows you to create a connection with another app or program using REST communication, is also a really good use case for scripting. However, it is a little bit more complex, and it's at a technical level that's beyond the scope of this webinar, because this webinar is really all about introduction to scripting. Talking about scripting and REST calls is a more advanced topic. But if you would be interested in attending a webinar about more advanced scripting, about more advanced REST calls, let us know, because we're looking for new ideas for webinars in 2025. So today we have two interesting examples here with these two update index data task and copy document workflow tasks. And this is a list of all of the workflow tasks that do support scripting. So there are quite a few. So starting off with the update index data task. This is a task that I think most of you are familiar with. This updates or changes an index field automatically at a certain point in a workflow. Typically, we use this as a status field. So after a manual task, a manager can approve or reject the payment of an invoice, for example. And after a decision has been made, automatically the status field in the category will be changed to reflect the decision. And with scripting, we can actually further enhance that. Typically, without scripting, the change would be made always the same under all circumstances. It would just automatically change. But with scripting, you can perform a mathematical calculation. You can add fields together. You can dynamically count the number of times a workflow has been attempted before escalating. And then you can add some conditions on the transitions. And then you can also add exceptions to when the index data change should occur. So scripting can really add specificity to this workflow task. And this is an example of what it looks like. And you can see here on the top right, you can click the JavaScript icon to add a script in there. And what's an example of a scenario where we would have scripting? Well, what you see here, this is a scenario in which an admission committee votes whether or not to admit a potential student to the university. You'll note we are using a user split task because at the time of the design of the workflow, we don't know the precise number of people who will vote. Every user in the committee must vote either yes or no to either accept or reject the students, which is configured with the manual task. So following this manual task, the update index field is used to update the number of votes on the category with either a yes or a no. And we're using scripting because we want the number of votes to be dynamically counted. Obviously, we don't know how people are going to vote, which is why the scripting comes in handy. Without scripting, it would always be updated to the same number, which would be silly. So we have a script here which counts the number of votes. Then the number of yes votes are merged. Then the workflow here is merged further on. And then the decision either goes to being accepted or rejected, depending on which one has received the more votes. We're going to focus on the script that's used here at this stage in the workflow. I know some of you are probably going to ask about the total workflow. We do have this complete workflow in one of our e-learning courses. I believe it's workflow 1. And then you can review it yourself to see the full configuration. So, Roman, Would you like to explain the configuration?
Yeah, of course. Once again, thanks a lot for giving introduction related to this use case. So as you can see, this is like how we call like a voting pattern. And in this particular example, we have one category, and on that category for the student admission process, as you can see, this category also, beside of this is simplified version of the category, and it also consists of two index additional fields, integer ones, for yes and no votes. And basically, at the beginning, we set the default value for these two fields to 0, because, of course, before the process has been started, there are no votes. And after that, in a workflow, any time where a committee member votes yes or no, this field will be updated by using the update index task. And you can see there is a very simple script where you say, okay, previous value of this index field +1. It's simple as that. Similar, actually, the same thing works for the number of the no votes, which is not basically graphically shown on this slide, but it's identical script. Just you will, instead of updating the yes votes, of course, you will do it for the number of no
No
votes.
votes. Yeah. So it's really so simple, guys. Yes votes +1. Even if you have no previous scripting experience, you can start using this right away, and it's really easy and works right away. So cool. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be the copy document task. So this is a relatively new workflow task. I believe it was first released with the main release there for 2024. And basically, it just is a task that can copy the index data and or documents from one category to another. And this example here that we show is actually coming from our masterclass. This is a workflow for job applications. And at the very end of the workflow, if a job applicant has been hired, their personal information is copied from the job applications category to the employee category. And what we're using in this task is we're using a very small script here that you can see. It's called workflow streams to copy equals -1. And this is a very small script that we add. It's already located within the objects and functions, and it only copies the index data and not any documents. Yeah, so again, very simple work. Roman, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. Jan basically already described the process. So what we see here on the screen at the end of the job application process, let's say that we decided to hire a potential candidate. As at the end of the process, we use like a copy document task. And as you can see, this process is related to the job application category, but let's say that all the candidates that are hired, we would like to copy them into separate category called employee list. And in this case, if we don't want to copy the document, but only the index data to another category, by leaving also the same index data in original category as well, we use these streams to copy function equal 1. This can be, as Jennifer shown to you on the previous slide, dynamically automatically created by just by selecting it from the objects and function list inside of the scripting editor. And in this case, what we're passing like a first name, last name, email, and position from job application category to employee list category. One thing also to be mentioned here, as you know, therefore document can consist of several files, right? And sometimes there is a need maybe to just pass to another category particular file from the document or several of them. So here you see if index data only needs to be copied to another category, then we use -1. But if you want maybe first document to be sent to another category, then you will say 0 or I don't know, second one, and etc. So that's also possible.
Yep. So what we call this is we say it's zero indexed, meaning that the first document is not one, it's actually zero. So always think of one number lower than usual. And that's something that we'll see throughout all examples, this zero indexing. Good. And last but not least, let's talk about indexing profiles. So what we saw previously, we saw something that looks very similar to an indexing profile here. Indexing profiles are very common and therefore, but they are perhaps one of the lesser known features. So I'll briefly explain. Indexing profiles are used every time outside data is copied or saved to a therefore category. They allow you to map the index fields to data. It's kind of like a bridge. You encounter them when using an eForm, when mapping the eForm data to a therefore category, when mapping information from the content connector to a category, from a template profile, or even within a REST call. So you encounter them everywhere. This here is an example of an indexing profile. And you can see here, you can add the script right here on this little JS. So a typical use case, of course, with an indexing profile is the information is always saved the same way to the therefore category. And you don't need any scripting to do that. But with scripting, you can specify or enhance how that data is saved before it lands in the therefore category. So I have these very simple schemas here. You can change the formatting. So it's still an A, but it's just a fancy A. Or you can add or subtract or do some kind of mathematical calculation before it's saved. The first example that we have here of indexing profiles is using the toDate function. The use case for this is if the source data has a date that's in a different format than how you want it to be saved in your therefore system. Typically, this would be, for example, in the US and Europe. In the US, they use month, day, year, whereas here in Europe, we use day, month, year. So of course, if you have a date like June 9th, which would be 6/9/2024, it's extremely confusing because to an American, they would read it as September 6th, right? So of course, it makes sense to then use a script to ensure that the date is in the correct format so that people can correctly identify it. The way that you get this is, again, opening up the script, and then you'll see here under objects and functions, you'll see we have toDate automatically appear on the list. So I'll once again hand over to Roman to explain to you a little bit more how to use this little helper.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer, for explaining the concept of the indexing profiles. As you have seen also, indexing profiles can be used in different areas of our product. For the eForms, even content connector can consume them, and etc. Jen also showed you on one of the previous slides for the update index task in a workflow. There is also a section similar to the indexing profiles. What we see on this for this concrete example, on the right side, you see one invoice, right? And basically, usually when we are using the indexing profiles, of course, they help us to tell the system where information is coming from and how that information should be saved into the therefore. In this particular case, we see one invoice, and here we are using like inside of the indexing profile, zonal OCR. So basically, we will draw a zone around the where we expect the date to appear on the document. And as you can see, this format of this date is different if the format actually of the date that you see on the document is different than the format that you have on your local machine or on the server, then you have to use this helper, as you have seen also on the previous slide. When you open the script editor in the indexing profile, then on the object button, you can find the different helpers or scripts that can be automatically generated to speed up your indexing operation. And in this case, you see under the assignment, we are using the helper called toDate. And this toDate helper has two attributes. The first one is the date that should be converted into the proper format. In our case, this date coming from the zonal OCR. And then the second parameter is the format of the date that we are basically see on the document. So you will not use the format of the date that you are finding on your local machine, but the date that you see on the document. That's the format that you should use here inside of the helper. So that's why you see that, as Jennifer also stated, if you are in the States, then the format of the date will start with the month at the beginning. But usually for most of us in Europe, it starts with the days, right? And that's why we have here the format double D, double M, 4 times Y, for the format that we see on this invoice.
Yep.
Cool. And then the test results are listed here in the list. Why we see here multiple rows? Because this is the invoice, multi-page invoice, and then we make a split or separation once the invoice number is changed. In this case, that's why you see 15 entries.
Yeah, but yeah, it's, I think also quite easy to use. You don't need a lot of any scripting knowledge to be able to use this function. So hopefully it's also a really good tip and trick for all of you. Good. Let's move on to a final one. And I was just reviewing the Q&A, and I saw someone actually has this as a request. Someone was saying they want to be able to save documents into therefore and start a new case. So this is exactly what you need. I'm very happy to be able to show this. So the use case for this scriptlet is when new information is coming into therefore, and you want that to be saved to a new case. So this is actually also quite easy to do using scripting. You can see here, you go to the create case scriptlet and click on it, and all this text automatically pops up. It looks incredibly overwhelming and scary, but the green text is actually instructions on what you need to do, and you only need to change the red. So that's all that you need to do. That's the first thing that you need to know, is just change the red. And it says, actually, if you go into the scriptlet, case header data 2, my case header data, Roman is now going to explain how that scriptlet works so that you can automatically create new cases using this create case scriptlet. So let's move on.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Once again, thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer also explained why we need to use this script in a case, especially when documents should be automatically saved into the therefore. For instance, if you receive an email, you can use the content connector for mailbox monitoring. So something that should happen automatically without user intervention, then this script could be very handy. And especially if you need to save a document or information into the category that belongs to the case. In our example, Jennifer already showed you that there is a ready-made scriptlet that you can generate, and then once the whole code will be generated over there, even with descriptions about the lines that should be changed or adjusted. And in this particular case, we have a case called case creation with 2 index fields. On the top, you can see company name and company address. And if you open each of these 2 fields, beside of the field name, which is stated as a caption, you can also find the field ID value. Field ID value is basically what we need to adjust in the script later on. That's why usually how you name the field, if let's say name of the field consists of several words, then usually the value for the field ID will be basically splitted by the underscore, like here company underscore name. The same thing is for the company address. And also the another thing what we need to know is the case name or case ID. You can see on the left side, we see that name of this case is case creation. And also at the bottom of the property dialog of the category, you can find the case ID 22. Now, knowing all this information, we can step into the script editor, and after generating the whole code for the case creation, we have to replace or adjust a couple of things. The first thing, if you have a look at the script editor, line number 6, index data case header, set case definition. Here you have to place the name of the case or the case ID number, which is I explained you on the left side where you can find this under the properties of the case definition. And basically, even what I'm telling to you, you can also find above of this line, 6 line explained, like under the comments, set which case definition we want to use. Furthermore, if you have a look at the lines in our case 13 and 14, because we have 2 index fields on our case level, like company name and company address. So to make sure that you would like, when you are saving a document into the case, that to check if case already exists, or if not, the script will help you to create completely a new case. Then you have to provide the values that will help you to create that case, or to check if for those values that you are having in this script, case already exists. In our case, you see there is a line 13 where we set the field company name. I explained also that you here need to use the field ID, which is in our case company underscore name. And then as a second attribute, you need to provide the value that should be checked or placed in this index field. In our case, we are extracting this information from one document, like a company value. The same thing is applicable for the company address, as you can see at the second parameter. And also line 12 shows you how that set field function works. So the first attribute is the column name. In our case, it's a name of the field, company name, for instance, or company address. And the second value is value that you would like to be set. And those are only the lines that needs to be changed. On the previous slide, Jennifer also showed you how this scriptlet can be generated. And basically the rest of the code in the scriptlet, even if looks like scary, you don't need to be afraid of it, because the rest of the code basically is used to automatically check if case that if case already exists, or if not, the new one will be created with the values that you provided here. And basically that's the whole logic behind this scriptlet.
Very good. We did get a lot of questions about this and more advanced use cases. So one question that we got is if you could mention where an existing case should be updated with incoming data. So if you have an existing case and you want to update it, how would you solve that issue?
I mean, just, there are places in our software, for instance, if you manually want to save something in therefore, right? Like, I don't know, right click on the document, then the category selection dialog will appear. And then you can also see if category belongs to the case, you will see already the list of the cases, and then you can select the case. I don't know, like if you have a list of the employees, I will see Jennifer Schmidt and I will select you, and then I can add a document. That's easy for the manual operation. But as you know, very often we would like to automatically save something into the therefore, like when content connector is used for the mailbox monitoring, for input folders, or if we are using the eForms, when they are submitted, and maybe the submitted form should be saved in the category that belong to the case. Those are automatic things. We don't see in advance, if case already exists or not. And if we are saving documents in the category, wherever we need to save a document in the category that belong to a case automatically, then we have to use this scriptlet, because that scriptlet will automatically, if you don't want to get an errors if case maybe does not exist, then this script will prevent that, and you will provide the values to firstly create the case and then to save the document into that case. Or if based on the values that you provided for the case header, like in this case, company name and address, if company therefore with our address already exists into the system will just pick up the existing case and save the document within. I don't know if I addressed the question properly, but this is how I understood the question.
Yeah. All right, lots of other questions. So we did get one, can we create new documents in the different category or cases with this copy workflow possibility? So I think this is exactly what it's for.
That's possible. That's possible. Also, you can use either a copy document task. Once again, we really want to keep this webinar simple, so you can also use the REST calls as well. There are different ways on how you can achieve it. If you also notice, even I'm trying not using a lot of technical words describing arrays, like index elements and etc., but just trying to explain this in a manner that would be understandable to almost everybody.
Yeah.
But we can, as Jen said, if there is an interest also, and this topic is very interesting to you, in the future we can also organize some other webinars on the scripting with more complex scripts and use cases. Yeah.
And we did get a lot of feedback already. I think I got 5 or 6 messages already saying people are interested in a more advanced webinar. So it's really good feedback, guys. Thank you. So that's, I'm conscious of time, so let's move on now. And we've seen now the 6 examples of scripting possibilities in eForms, indexing profiles, and workflow. So now the big thing is, how do you talk to customers about scripting? Martin had sent me a message earlier in this webinar, which I think is a really good point, is that for most customers who have no idea about therefore, scripting is going to be a topic that is really advanced. And it's going to be something that is not interesting for most customers because they simply don't know what it is. They just want the software to work. However, there are customers who have incredible knowledge. They have extremely involved and knowledgeable system administrators. They themselves are coming up with feature requests and ideas of what they want to have happen. And these types of customers are the ones that you want to talk to scripting about. And it's not something that you should force into the conversation. It's more to give you the confidence that if you think a customer is requesting something or has ideas, that you can weigh if scripting can solve their need or not. My primary goal with this webinar is to avoid the situation where somebody says, oh, I saw that there was scripting and I just ran away. Because I've had people say this to me, and this is the goal. I don't want you to have that feeling anymore. So for most of you on this call, perhaps you are way beyond that level. But for those of you who are new to this idea, what should you do if your customer comes up to you and says, hey, does therefore support scripting? Or hey, can this be solved with scripting? And you don't know scripting yourself. Should you just close the door and run away and hope the customer forgets that they even had that question? No, of course not. So what should you do if you're in that position? First of all, try to understand what the usual function of the therefore feature entails. Are they talking about a workflow? Are they talking about eForms? Make sure that you have at least basic knowledge of what's going on. And then the next step is to ask questions and really get as specific as possible. Because remember, the main purpose of scripting is to enhance what is already there. We're not creating new capabilities. And you're going to be listening, as the customer describes this need, you're going to be listening for specificity. So you're looking for a really specific action, like we saw in these examples, that happens at a particular point and not a big new feature. You're looking for something that's extremely specific. And the more specific this request is or this question, the more likely it is that it's going to be a scripting issue. And if you don't know scripting yourself, just keep asking questions. When should this happen? Under which circumstances? Which part of the workflow, if it's a workflow, which part of the eForm do you want? What is it that should happen? When? And the more specific, the better. Because then you can take it over to the pre-sales team and they can help you either implement it or help you really understand what the next steps would be. Good. So now I have a final quiz to see if you guys were paying attention and have a good understanding of what can be achieved. So I have on my screen, I have a poll and that says, what requests can be solved with scripting? Are you able to answer? Now, there are some different options here. Either a request cannot be solved with scripting at all, either it's a feature request, or perhaps it's so nebulous and so unclear that perhaps you need to ask more questions before you know if it's a scripting request or not. So I see on the screen here, people are answering questions already. We're going to let for 3, 2, 1, lock in your answers, and let's end the poll. And I'll share the results here. And what are the answers? Well, number 1 was, therefore should have a new integrated AI feature which can automatically summarize the context of saved documents. This was not scripting. This is a feature request. So this is very clearly a feature request because you're really adding a new functionality within the product interface, which does not exist right now. B is scripting. An eForm should be able to calculate the total value of goods on an order form. C, also scripting to automatically create a new employee file in the HR software using REST after checking if that new employee name already exists. And now D, this one we see here. So most of you guys got B and C correct. But D was add more options for overdue workflow tasks. This one I actually categorized as ask more questions because with overdue workflow tasks, we don't know, is this something that they want to have integrated into the product interface? Is this something that could be done with just regular configuration? Could we add scripting to add more conditions on when a task is considered overdue? Do we add more loops? I mean, there are so many possibilities with workflow that just having this very general statement, I'm not exactly sure what is meant. And so I had said this one was ask more questions. And that's just kind of a reminder to really, before you go and make a general statement, yes, it's possible, no, it's not possible, ask questions, try to understand what the use case really is. And yeah, that brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. We see eForms, workflow, and indexing profiles all offer scripting capabilities. Let me close this off. And all three allow you to add specificity to those existing features, either performing mathematical calculations, enabling, disabling components, adding more conditions, or specifying what's saved. So it's really useful, but it's not necessarily something that we need to be scared of. It's something that can specifically enhance their features. If you're interested in learning more, we do have scripting in a lot of our e-learning courses, Workflow 1, 2, eForms 1 and 2, Electronic Document Import talks about the content connector, and then of course our masterclass. So before we go, I have one more quiz here. How do you feel about scripting now? A is you're still scared and you don't want to talk about it. B is the word scripting no longer strikes fear in your heart. C is you'd be willing to chat about it. And D was you were a pro before the webinar even started and you haven't lost any of your knowledge in this past hour. So let's try just adding in the Q&A. You guys can let me know if you enjoyed this webinar or not. Just type your answers and let me know if you'd be interested in more advanced topics in the future. Let's see if we get any. Excellent. So we got some good feedback, B's and C's. So I'm really happy to hear that you guys would be willing to chat about it and you're no longer full of fear when you hear the word scripting. So that's good. And that concludes this webinar. It's December, so end of the year already. I will be back in January with another exciting new topic. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to learn with us about scripting and for your questions, your enthusiasm. Have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And let's